Hello, my name is Joanna Pena, and I will be presenting a behavioral change project for this subject that I have encountered through my volunteering at this organization called the Phasia House. So first off, an overview or an observation of the behavior. So the subject, his name is Ronnie, just to not give away his real name, but he's a white male about 40 years old who's a community member at the organization Aphasia House, and he has a condition called aphasia where he has difficulty speaking in full sentences and vocalizing words when prompted. So for example, instead of being able to say, I lost my keys, sometimes there's a lot of stuttering involved before being able to say the full sentence properly, or they will just take a while to be able to say the full sentence. So the inappropriate behavior that Ronnie displays is that he when he gets frustrated or when he can't say something that he really wants to be able to say, he curses and he bangs his hand on a table, because we usually sit at tables when we're doing the volunteering, so he'll bang his hand on it and curse. So an example of this behavior is when we're playing Jeopardy, a game of Jeopardy, which is where somebody asks a question and then whoever knows the answer gets to buzz in and say the answer, and then you get points like that. So they're broken up into teams, and each team gets to press the button when they know the answer, and every time a question pops up that Ronnie knows, he'll reflexively press the button, but he'll come to a pause, and because he has difficulty saying the answer, he'll curse and he'll bang his fist on the table one time. Usually it's never more than once. So the rationale for the selection of this behavior is that I think it's important to address, because I would like to help Ronnie decrease his use of violence and foul language, and especially because it could eventually hurt him one day, where maybe he'll bang his hand too hard on the table and it'll physically hurt him, or because he bangs his hand on the table so many times it can cause damage to his hand over time. Or sometimes, this has never happened before, but I worry that one day he'll get too frustrated and maybe he'll lose the sense of where he's banging his hand on the table, and maybe he'll bang his hand on another volunteer or another community member, so that it'll just cause either him or somebody else physical harm. And I think this behavior is important to address because I would like to decrease the likeliness of somebody getting harmed as much as I possibly can. So the replacement behavior I chose for Ronnie is that because he gets frustrated and because he doesn't really react well to high stress environments, he'll immediately curse and he'll immediately resort to violence. So I feel like a replacement behavior that would be good to decrease this just impact of violence on him would be to be able to remove him from the stressful environment and then give him time to be able to come up with his words and say what he wants to say. So I believe that Ronnie being able to channel his anger and frustration to a more appropriate, productive behavior will be able to help him with his patience, and in turn help him eventually say the words he wants to say and overcome his disability. So I'm thinking that one example of a behavior that he can use to replace the inappropriate behavior of using foul language and of banging his fist on the table would be to, when he gets frustrated and when he is in that situation where he can't say the words that he wants to say, to be able to excuse himself from the situation, say, "One moment, please," something like that, and then come back when he has his words. Because since we are in a volunteer environment, everybody's very patient because we know that the people we are volunteering with have these conditions, so nobody's trying to rush anybody. So I think this is the perfect environment for Ronnie to start replacing his behavior, mainly because the audience that he's talking to are patient with him and will be able to help him realize that inappropriate behavior is more impactful and better for him. So for the functional behavior analysis, the circumstances of the behavioral observation are that the most likely situation in which Ronnie gets frustrated and resorts to his inappropriate behavior is in a competitive, high-stress environment. So, for example, when we were playing Jeopardy and the games and stuff like that where he has to compete against somebody, or there's just kind of like a competitive environment, he is more likely to get more frustrated, and in turn, he is more likely to display his inappropriate behavior. But on another hand, when we do book club, which is very low stress. It's everybody is sitting around a table and everybody reads a passage from a book and has a volunteer helping them out. Ronnie is much less likely, and I don't think I've ever heard him ever display an inappropriate behavior in this scenario, because he has a volunteer next to him and the presence of the volunteer calms him down, and it just provides a support for him so that he knows that if he can't say a word, the volunteer is there to help him. So he usually comes in every day to this community, and so he'll be observed mainly in those two scenarios, but because he is displaying the inappropriate behavior, the main part that he will be observed in will be the times where there's high stress and competitive environment. So the consequences of the behavior, when Ronnie does display this inappropriate behavior, the volunteer leader usually tries to skip over him. So if he'll curse and bang his head on the table, we'll usually just skip over him so that it doesn't lead to any more frustration and any more violence or anything. So I'm thinking that because of this consequence, that Ronnie sometimes chooses to displays this inappropriate behavior at times where he just doesn't want to answer the question, and he knows that if he curses or if he bangs his fist on the table, that we'll just skip him over and he doesn't have to answer anything. So he gains the avoidance of being able to answer the question is what he gets from that behavior. So as I said before, a big influence on the behavior is the type of environment. So the high stress competitive environment of playing the games, that is usually comes into play when Ronnie displays his inappropriate behavior, just because he has a condition and it is just more likely to come out when he's frustrated. But another influence on the behavior, on the decreasing of his behavior, is actually when a volunteer is next to him and is actually helping him out with his speech, because that takes away the stress and he knows that he has somebody there to help him when he can't say something. So for example, if he can't say cat, he'll say things that are related to cat, and then the volunteer will acknowledge that what he's trying to say is cat. So it's a lot easier for him to say what he wants to say when there's a volunteer trying to help him out. So the hypothesis that I have in mind is that Ronnie's cursing and banging his hand on the table is a way to avoid having to answer questions during activities. So for the actual behavioral intervention design, my behavioral objective is, when unable to say the word he wants to say, Ronnie will excuse himself from the situation and come back when he is ready to speak for at least 3 consecutive days. That's what I want Ronnie to try to do. So to actually be able to get him to increase the likelihood of his replacement behavior, I would like to use reinforcers. And I know that because Ronnie feels more comfortable with a volunteer next to him, I feel like the primary reinforcer that we should use is a social reinforcer, which is having the volunteer sitting next to him and helping him out when he gets to that place where he is frustrated and unable to speak. But because volunteers need to kind of rotate around and pay attention to everybody, there isn't always going to be a volunteer next to him. So I'm thinking that because he loves chocolate, and I know that he likes chocolate, that maybe an edible reinforcer will also help him increase his replacement behavior. So the edible reinforcer that I chose is a small chocolate bar, so that when he decides to excuse himself and when he decides to excuse himself and come back when he's more ready to speak, that he'll be able to get a chocolate bar, and then hopefully that increases the likelihood of his replacement behavior. So the data collection method that I want to use when recording this behavior is the frequency recording method, just because this behavior, it happens multiple times, and especially because it happens almost every time that I'm there. So I would like to use that method to be able to collect the data. So the data collection chart that I have is the event recording form that was given to us on web courses. And so I have the subject's name, I have my name, and then the dates of observation, which was the 22nd of October to the 5th of November. So the behavior definition in this case is that one frustrated Ronnie yells out the curse word and he bangs his hand on the table one time. So usually when I go volunteer, it's from 12:30 to 3:30, and that would be the time period of observation. And so as we see here, the baseline is 3 days. So he usually did on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, he would curse and bang his hand on the table three, and then on the last day 4 times. And then that's when I started to try to get volunteers to be next to him and try to help him out. And the behavior did decrease, so it went down to 2, and it would go up sometimes, and that would vary. But yeah, the behavior did decrease a little. It didn't get completely eradicated, just because it was only about 15 days, I would say, that we implemented this behavior, this reinforcement and like increasing of the behavior of the replacement behavior. So hopefully with more time, he would be able to completely eradicate his behavior. But yeah, so for now we have a demonstration of a decrease in behavior, which is a definition of success on my end. But yeah, that's what I have for today, and thank you for listening to my presentation.